Right, we are ready to get started. So welcome everyone. Um, so this is the first session of a series, and I'll explain. I'll give a little bit of background just to give you an idea of what's going on really. So over the past 3 years, I've been having conversations with companies from a bit all over, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. But these are companies like B2B, B2C companies, large and small. And the objective of these conversations and some surveys that we've sent out um, were really oriented towards understanding what are the key success factors for an e-commerce. And, can we create a cheat sheet? Is it possible to find some elements which are common across all sites or most sites that are successful? So hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights that are completely new to you. However, from this research, one thing that has come up is that there are several things which we probably all think are useful, but they actually seem to be quite crucial. So I'll go and explain that. So the first thing I want to show is this slide. So let me remove a couple of elements here. Okay. So we have. So this slide basically shows what kind of people I've been speaking to and the kind of companies and also the territories across which they are. So as you can see, basically all the data I have collected comes from this. So what the first thing to notice is that it's probably less relevant or for the APAC market, for example, because most of the companies were in between UK and the rest of Europe. And the people I've been speaking with within the companies are really like the C-level executives and owners of businesses, managing directors, and e-commerce and marketing professionals. Plus, the surveys that we've sent out have we've reached more than 200 responses, but these are across a few different surveys. It's just so that we could have an understanding of how companies think and what they do, and also how the users actually what they would like to see. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And the size of the companies that I've been speaking to really orbits mainly between 5 and 50 million in overall size, but there are exceptions with much larger companies and much smaller ones as well. Now, I'm not going to be listing any of the companies I've spoken to because I don't think that's the real point of this session, but this does already give a bit of an overview. So with these companies, the conversation we've been having really, as I said, were oriented towards understanding what makes success and what are the key focus areas. So the first thing that comes across is that for an e-com site to be successful, it needs to do two things. And these two things are meeting the customer's expectations, but also, and probably mainly in many ways, the business expectations. So on one side, you have all those desires that a business has, or reasons or drivers that they have to launch an e-com site. So from increasing sales, increasing efficiency, intelligence, and being able to scale across different channels and territories. So of course, in a way, all these kind of add up to, I want to scale, I want to expand because I want to sell more. But in many cases, it's not just about this for a company, but it's also about, delivering that brand message and doing more than just selling. So it's selling, but while also achieving other kind of goals. Whilst from a user perspective, from a customer perspective, it's really, if you ask them what is important for them, it kind of boils down to these four elements. One is the experience. So and by experience, I don't just mean the UX experience, I mean a lot more than that, and we'll see more about that. And then security is one thing which is basically given for granted. So unless it is secure, people won't really buy, and it doesn't help with reputation. And then the other two elements there are really something that would deserve a complete series of webinars on their own. So convenience as well, it's something much more broad than pricing alone. So convenience is a blend of many other factors. And values here, I'm talking about the brand values and how these align with the core values that a person has. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. So the focus for this series is going to be the experience side of things, and mostly the experience on site. So we're talking about e-commerce success as a website. And these are some of the main words that I've pulled out from the conversations that I've had, not just with the companies, but also from the surveys and other conversations with people that buy online. So like the user, and this is not in one country, but over the course of 3 years, you end up speaking with many people. So you see that there are things like brand values that are really, I've actually made that a little bit bigger because it's an agglomerate of many different things. It's how I feel about the site. It's how they express what they want to do and what they want to achieve and why they sell. But also everything else, like the smoothness of the site and how it's secure and how engaging it is. This all goes towards the experience. So let's not think just about the UX. So before we move on to understanding and looking at some of these elements, one thing that we need to understand is that to be successful, you need to do 3 things. The first thing is to have a self-assessment of how you think you are doing in terms of experience. So how good you think your experience is. The second thing is to really try to get an understanding of what your customers would like in terms of experience and how they rate your experience specifically. And then the other thing is to benchmark what you are delivering with the industry best practices in terms of experience. So not just against your competitors, but against the entire industry, because these expectations that clients have are not built by your competitors, but by their experience in shopping online in general. So this is not specific for B2B or B2C. This goes across everything, because also B2B users, for example, are now used to shopping online with simplicity, and they kind of expect to have that same treatment also in a B2B site. So it's not just an order by SKU kind of experience or upload a CSV file with all the products that you want to download. That has to be part of it, but there's more to it. So if this is directly from the surveys, and one thing to notice is that this is pre-COVID. So some elements like avoiding crowds probably are much more dominant now. However, COVID is an exception. So my feeling about this is that it has skewed these stats a lot in the short term, but within a few more months, this will go back to being more like it was before. And I think we're going to have to send out more surveys soon to see how the situation has actually changed. So maybe we can put more sessions into that. Now, the interesting thing to see here is that we sent, it was like 20 different questions or options, let's say, around what makes their preferences. And the ones in blue are really related to convenience in terms of like saving time or comfort. The green ones are related to price. And then there is that red one, which is really, it's the only option is to buy online. For example, if you're like downloading or streaming music or videos or anything like that, the only option is to do it online. And then you have another interesting thing is that basically 92%, because these are percentages, so 92% of people have also indicated other factors in terms of what they feel is important for them when they're shopping online. So how to go from completely unaware to being an advocate. And by being advocate, I don't just mean that you're basically promoting the brand, but a good example of this is really like Apple users that will defend the brand. This is the best product that I can buy, or the best product on the market, or the best service. And in the same way, this is the kind of thing that we're looking to achieve. So we are looking to build advocates. Now, the first part of the journey is really to find the brand for the user, and that could happen across social media, search, and so on. But also from there, they then land on the actual website, and this is where the browsing experience starts. And after browsing, so, you know, like search and all the other means, they go on to validating the product that they found and the brand, trying to understand if it's worth buying it there. They then go through the purchase process. But this is not where the experience on the site ends, because there is also all that part that goes from when you've purchased the product all the way to receiving the feedback. So you're receiving it, but you're also expecting to have updates on that delivery. And if you need to return the item, you probably want to initiate the process on the site, or there are reasons for sending updates on that as well. Ultimately, I want my money back, so I want to know how this is going. And then you have the feedback part, which is really important, because that feedback that you receive is then used during the validation phase for other users. And from there, you go on to the promotion side of things, which is really where you end up having like engagement with social media and spreading the word. So what we're going to do now is dig into everything which is on site. So from browsing to feedback. And later on, I will introduce you to the other two panelists that are here that will be joining me in the next sessions coming up. So let's start with some of the best practices. So on top of those 6 areas, I've also added another 2. And these are personalization and speed. And the reason being is that you can have an experience which is fantastic, but if it's slow, it just won't deliver. It's not really going to work. It's not going to be enough. And also, unless you have a personalization on your website, that messaging that you're sending out, it's really the same for everyone. So what you want to do is to be able to personalize the experience for each individual user, not just user groups. So you want to go beyond that. And this is where it really makes a difference for the user, because everything becomes relevant for them specifically. We go straight in now and into this browsing part. And the first thing that really matters, so this again is like speaking with the companies, what they're doing, having a look at whether we could find elements which seems to be consistent across all the brands that we've spoken to. And these areas seem to be consistent no matter what. So taxonomy is the first part. So it's how you deal with your data and with your categories, and how you make it accessible to the users. So it needs to be a simple navigation or a clear navigation. And you know, there's many examples that we could bring of bad examples that you also have seen across the industry. Second thing is filters. Now, this is one note about this. It depends on how many products you have, because if you're only selling one product, there's no point in creating filters for that. And the same goes for search as well. However, in most cases, brands have more products, so enough products to have valid filters. And filters can work in different ways. They can kind of narrow down, but also allow you to multi-select parameters on which you want to filter by. So this makes the experience smoother. Search has become a predominant thing, and it's really probably one of the most important areas of the website, because most people are now searching, especially on mobile. It becomes easy to just, instead of scrolling down the list of menus, if you have many products, just search for the item and go for it. So search is important, but only if it works properly, because if it doesn't deliver on the expectation, again, people won't use it. And a good reason to put some effort into that is that people that engage with search are actually more likely to convert, because they already have a product in mind. So this next thing is the landing pages. So if you have campaigns, you really want to be able to have some dedicated pages specific for the campaign. Content blocks as well is another way of navigating through the site. You know, like the banners, or maybe even some articles that you can, or stories that you can publish on the website. And then you have recommendations. So when you're in a product, and it may not be the perfect one, but you can do upselling and cross-selling, and these again are very used. And then you have the guided selling. So for instance, if you are if you have a car and you may just want to put in your number plate, and it gives you all the elements which are related to that car. So it's guiding you towards the products which are strictly related to that search that you've made or what you're looking for. And then you have the user-generated content, which is another massive part. And imagine like social media streams, feeds where, you know, people are just browsing around, and then all of a sudden you pull that into the website, and you can really leverage that. Now, the ones in blue are the parts that are most frequently personalized. And one of our panelists here, Thijs, is going to give us a bit of an intro about that later on. So next in is the validation process. So what happens here is that you found the product, and the product information is the first thing, which is absolutely key. So if you don't have good product information, your chances of converting a user is really quite low. So you have to make sure that you have the right information displayed in the right way. Then you have the product comparison, which in many cases, you may not be sure whether one product is right for you. So that comes in really handy. And then you have the videos, because e-commerce is not a tactile experience. You can't smell it. And I think images and videos are what go towards that. So it's not just about showing the product, but it's about expressing the values that it has. Then you have the reviews, which we all know and we all use. One thing to mention about reviews is that some brands, like high-end fashion brands, may not want reviews to be displayed, but it's a good idea also to maybe have some reviews in the policies, for example. So when you're talking about returns, and then you can have that feedback and say, okay, so the return policy is actually being put in practice in the right way, because I can see people are commenting on that and it's positive. And it's also a way for you to collect feedback from the clients to understand how your service is progressing. And then you have the social feed. So imagine pulling in like the Instagram feed into a product, or even the product images that are actually Instagram pictures from users. So this is, again, another way to show it goes towards social proofing. You have the returns policies are important, because before purchasing, you want to understand how that works. And as a last final thing is the customer service. So one thing to remember is that the better you do in all these areas, the less workload you will have on the customer service. And the ones in blue are really the ones about social proofing and user-generated content, for which we have another panelist here, Robin, that I will introduce later. So next part is the purchasing process. And this one is just critical across all companies. And again, if you have like B2B, you have different payment systems, and you may want to pay on account, and this is something that needs to be catered for in detail. You have to be careful about this area. So price is something which is not related to the website, but unless your pricing strategy is right, that's going to be a big blocker. But the price has to be right, has to be evidently shown on the site. The second thing is that the checkout needs to be smooth, quick. So it's not really a matter of how many steps you have, it's more a matter of how much information you're requesting. So this is one area in which many companies actually get it wrong and would require improvement. But the other thing is that right now there are third-party technology providers that really help smoothen that process. Security evidence is really related to having those certificates in place. So you need to have your SSL certificates. You need to be able to show that it's secure to buy on this website. And the payment options is, again, you don't have to have too many payment options, but you have to have the right ones. And often enough, these need to be localized depending on what territory you're in. So, maybe PayPal is relevant in one country, but in the Nordics, you probably want to use something like Klarna or other payment systems, which are really well known in that area. So it's really about localizing it and getting it right for each individual place. The refund policy needs to be clear. And again, it's not about we refund everything. It's really about having that clarity before I make that purchase. And then it's a clear confirmation. So one thing that some companies fail at is giving clear confirmation of the payment has gone through, it's been accepted, we will be shipping your product as soon as possible, but that really needs to be clear. Okay, next. So this is related to the receiving part. It feels like the end of the website is really related to the purchase journey, but in reality, this is where you can excel more and complete that experience for the client. So I don't just want to know that you've taken my money, but I also want to have clarity over what's happening during this process. And so the tracking information needs to be ready available, but also if you can, it would be good to be able to track the parcel directly from the website, or to have clear information in case, I don't know, I've lost my email, I've lost my tracking code, and it must be easy to retrieve that information. And then one proactive thing you can do is send status updates notifications. So, you know, it's like the parcel has been shipped. And if the courier that you're using allows you, and, you know, also show the different statuses of where the parcel is in its journey. And then you have the support page. In case I am not clear on something, make sure that it answers the right questions in relation to this part. And all this is really important because, again, it removes the strain from the customer service that otherwise will be contacted like throughout the process to know where the parcel is, where it's been delivered, and you really want to make sure that all these parts are clear. And very similarly, it's the return process. So one thing which differs here is the pre-return feedback. So normally, as some companies do, and I know that some of the companies that are logged in now are actually doing this, of you put a piece of paper inside the box when you ship it, and if you want to return, all you have to do is fill that in and ship it back to an address. Now, when you do this, you lose an opportunity to understand why people are returning the product. And because it may not be related to the product itself, but it could be that at the warehouse, for example, you are there's a little bit of disorder, and therefore they're shipping the wrong size or the wrong color, or maybe the size wasn't the right one in terms of it doesn't fit properly. So in these cases, what you want to do is to have to initiate the returns process online. So you can ask a few questions to understand why the product is being returned. And it's really about the difference between having to return an item, being given the money back, and then having to repurchase the item. So now there's a few deliveries going on here. Well, if you initiate the process online, it could be an exchange. So then people are sending back the item, but at least you've saved the sale. And in that way, you're sending them the right product instead. So if it's a mistake, if people return the item and get the money back, they may decide not to buy it again. So that's the other important reason for that. So on-site status updates and notification support and customer service are all the same reasons. But in short, this is still part of the experience that you're giving through the website. Okay. So final stage is the feedback loop. And this is really where one of our panelists will be able to give us a little bit more insights. But the importance of reviews, again, is quite dramatic. It appears to be quite dramatic because you can get so much intel that you don't necessarily have to display to the users. But understanding, how they felt about the overall experience, and being able to just get that intelligence will allow you to improve your service and potentially the products themselves. But this is often something which is not done appropriately because it's normally not segmented. And again, Robin will be able to tell us a little bit more about that. But I think this is really important to be able to collect reviews and do as much as you can to be able to not just collect reviews, but other user-generated content, because it goes towards the social proofing and it goes back into that validation stage, which is so important before the purchase. Social feed is another thing. People will be posting about your products. And to be fair, this is, whether it's B2B or B2C, it's still very relevant. So I don't want to make distinguish these in this presentation. I think we could potentially do a dedicated session to the differences between B2B and B2C experiences. But it is very important to understand that these are quite significantly different in many areas, but the ones that we have highlighted here are really consistent across both. And then you have the other channels. So the feedback doesn't just come through that. You may be selling through marketplaces as well. You may be having a very good presence on forums or other channels anyway. So just make sure that you cultivate that feedback. And again, all this can also be, that feedback can also be provided through the customer service, emails or in chat. And somehow you need to be able to make use of that. That feedback is really what's going to help you understand where you need to be heading next in terms of your e-commerce growth or digital maturity growth. And now I'm going to introduce you to the two speakers. So we have Thijs Bedell, who is head of partnerships at Clerk.io, also a very good friend of mine, and he will be talking to us about the personalization. Hello, Thijs. And then we have Robin Lewis, partnership manager at Yotpo, and again, he will be telling us more about social proofing and user-generated content. So at the moment, what we're doing in this session is to give you a bit of a teaser of what's coming up in the next 2 sessions, so that this is when we're actually going to be starting to dig deep into each one of those topics. And after this, I will also give you one more thing, which is important for you as attendees. And what I would like to ask is that you wait until the end of this, so that I'll give you that additional part. Thijs, do you?
Yeah,
you're online. Hello there.
I'm here. Can you all hear me? I hope so. So yeah, for the next session, so we have booked in on 27th. We're gonna dig into sort of what is personalization for e-commerce, and obviously, off the bat, it kind of reads well of what is it. Of course, it's personalizing each aspect of the browsing and the journey online. But that being said, people tend to sort of think of it solely as just on banners and recommendation, and it does really evolve across the whole sort of experience of it, to Mutu's point. And you pointed out 4 key areas, whether it's in search or landing pages or content blocks, or something like the actual recommendations on the site. So I think what's very interesting to understand from that point of view is that we did a big analysis on our side of both existing clients and reach out deeper with Statistica, and actually came across something that almost 17% of everyone that visits your site actually has an intent to buy something, but it's actually only 2.7, or just less than 3%, that actually tend to do it because they're not really necessarily finding the product for it. That alone is not personalization to solve it, but that's kind of what we're up against, or that's the ambition. That's what we can achieve. That's where we can reach with it. So obviously, these are all things that can convert both your conversion rate and your basket size. And I think what's interesting really about it, if, for instance, take something like search. I've seen a lot of great example where people will search on a site that sells workwear. And then it's like, well, are you a carpenter? Are you a plumber? Which is the kind of workwear? Are you searching in the middle of the summer? Are you searching in the middle of the winter? All of those things are things that you can affect and make it a much more relevant and personalized experience, considering your profile and how it's like. And you are able to do a lot of those things also in extrapolations from an AI perspective, even if you don't have much data about a person and seeing who they're similar to. And so you can make it go all the way back into things like emails that goes out, at what time you're opening, and all that. So there's really a wealth of opportunity to do it. But that being said, I wanted to start somewhere a little bit more simpler for the next season, because I think also what's important to understand is there are a lot of these things that you can kind of set up and forget and make work for you. So prior to next season, for those who would like to attend it, I think it would be a wonderful idea if you check out someone like New Force Clothing, which there should be a link in them, which is sending out. Just try out adding something to the basket, trying it, and we can kind of discover on the next session how different the experiences can be. So try out the search, try to add something to the basket, and maybe even sign up to the newsletter if you like. And this is an organization that's quite small. They sell obviously here in this experience B2C, but they're also someone who started out selling a lot on a B2B level, which is something we will discover as well in the next session, that really from our perspective, from an AI perspective, whether you sell B2C, whether you sell B2B, it's not that different to us. We've even had examples where we've onboarded retail clients that are more wholesale based and pulled in a sort of offline transactional data. So I hope to join you on the 27th, and I'll pass it over moving forward to Rob.
Okay, so thank you, Thijs. I'm going to move over to Rob. Rob, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Maurizio. Thanks. So yeah, I'm Robin. Rob. I work at Yotpo, and I head up the UK strategic partnerships. Yotpo is an e-commerce marketing platform that offers a lot of solutions: reviews and ratings, visual UGC, loyalty and referrals, SMS, and insights. But we will be focusing on the validate and feedback areas that Maurizio mentioned in his presentation. So we'll be focusing more on reviews and ratings and visual UGC. Now we're living in a very different time now, even like in the last 3 months, let alone 12 months. And we've seen that brand strategy, which has been leaning towards e-commerce more and more over the last few years, has seen accelerated growth into the digital space. And we think brands who invest well now will reap the rewards over the coming months and years. But unable to compete with Amazon, say, on price, selection, or delivery, many brands are differentiating through intangibles. So customer community, brand values, people are really, really relating to all of this. So as this retail paradigm shifts from fulfilling to generating customer demand, we have seen a lot of our customers, a lot of digital first brands have been at the forefront of harnessing user generated content to maximize the one key edge that they do have over this, which is the direct link to consumers. Likewise, we've seen manufacturers and wholesalers who up until recently relied a lot on retailers are now pivoting to sell direct to consumer, which allows them to engage directly with their end customer. We're entering a completely different world and an evolution in online commerce. But while reviews were a revelation in customer trust when they were first introduced, they have since become a staple for every online retailer, from super niche micro brands through to big box department stores. And we're seeing B2B establishments beginning to utilize this form of feedback too. After all, regardless of the business, it's still a person-to-person relationship. You're still interacting between two humans. So feedback is always going to be a wonderful form of communication. To illustrate that point, 98% of online shoppers say that reviews are the most important factor in a purchase decision. And the goal of any pre-purchase research is to get answers. That's why you're looking at the reviews. The challenge for brands is to figure out how they can provide answers to the specific questions of every individual shopper. And to do this, they need to first collect as much information as possible from other customers on these topics, and then present it in an easy to consume format. Content is the fuel that makes the online shop run. So how do brands collect user-generated content effectively? We'll be touching on that quite a lot in more detail in the next session. But getting the right content is only half the battle. The other half is making sure it gets seen. Reviews were historically displayed in chronological order. The addition of filters made it possible for consumers to rearrange reviews by star rating and so on. But that sort of basic display doesn't cut it. In these days, consumers have no patience for any unnecessary legwork. We want to make things as easy as possible. We want to find the information we need quickly and efficiently and then move on. Given the abundance of choices, any added distraction sends customers straight off to Amazon. But with the help of natural language processing, large amounts of content can be now synthesized into relevant, digestible highlights. And the most effective content can be automatically identified and displayed. So coupled with personalization, as Thijs was mentioning, brands can not only show content in the right format, but show the precise content that a specific shopper is looking for. In short, brands are better able to tailor the on-site experience to individual preferences. And this is good. When the consumer default is Amazon, there's no longer tolerance for imperfect brands. You have to get things right on the first visit. In one recent survey that we looked at, a staggering 90% of consumers aged 18 to 54 said that Amazon was their top place to shop. And it is a lot of pressure, but luckily, direct-to-consumer brands are uniquely positioned to capitalize on this new e-commerce landscape. owning the entire value chain, and this is something that's massively underappreciated, but owning the entire value chain from product development to customer experience, shipping, and even marketing, so everything that Maurizio has mentioned, means that the brands can make changes quickly, but only if they need to know what needs to be changed. As Maurizio mentioned, the feedback that you can gather can be so richly utilized, and customer content provides a constant stream of feedback about thousands of topics. Looking at aggregated star ratings may seem like a quick solution to analysing mounds of reviews. Now look, I've got this product that's got 500 reviews and 80% of them are 5-star. It must be fine. It doesn't give you the whole picture. A 5-star review can also contain important requests for improved delivery time, while a 1-star review, which could be mistakenly written off as negative, may contain plenty of helpful details that can entice customers to buy. People really get engaged with this. So the big challenge for brands is how to actually extract this useful information hidden in the text at scale. And again, we'll be looking at how brands can do this in our session. Just to touch on visual content quickly, 77% of shoppers prefer consumer photos over professional shots. Savvy shoppers expect to see user-generated images alongside polished brand imagery. Indeed, research has shown that ads featuring user-generated content has 4 times higher click-through rates and half the cost per click against ads with no user-generated content. It also helps boost time and resource saving. In our latest survey, we spoke to multiple brands about their plans and utilization for UGC. And as one respondent put it, when the marketing team runs out of ideas for organic marketing campaigns, that's when UGC comes into the picture. The customer journey is no longer a straight line. Instead, it's an unpredictable squiggle. Diligent shoppers bounce from channel to channel many times before finally deciding to make a purchase, which means that in order to reach them, you have to leverage UGC on as many different marketing channels as possible. So in our session, we'll be taking a deep dive into why user-generated content, both written and visual, is important, investigating and explaining why it's a must-have for both brands and consumers, and exploring in more detail how to optimize the customer experience and best utilize this rich vein of content. If you want to beforehand have a look at a couple of our customers there, Frank Body and Leatherman, there's some really good examples of how to utilize customer review and feedback and UGC both on the homepage, category listing page, and the product detail page itself. And if you want to check out what we've got coming up in our own webinars and content that we produce, because we do put out some quite useful content regularly, have a look at our LinkedIn page. But I really hope, to see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Robin. So one of the reasons why I rushed a little bit through the entire presentation, which was quite fast-paced, is because I have 2 more things to show, and I wanted to leave the time for these 2 intros. So now that we have still a few minutes to go, one thing is the experience assessment. So the idea is to allow all of you attending to use these sessions to build a self-assessment of the experience you're delivering to your customers. So what we will do is, following each of the detailed sessions, we will be providing some questions that by answering you can self-assess yourself as a company and the experience you have, but also benchmark against the industry best practices. So the one thing that will remain to do after that is to get feedback directly from your customers in terms of what they think of your experience. And this will help you then create a roadmap of the innovation that you need to bring to your website to be able to meet those expectations, not based on where your customer or what your customer expects now, but based on having that view, that long-term view of what's changing in the industry, what are the best practices, because you don't have to have them all, but it really depends on what your customers expect. But if you're always reacting to what they're asking, you're always a little bit too late, and you never get to capitalize on that investment as much as you could have done at the same cost. So in each session, we'll send you the questions for each one. So the next session is going to be the browsing experience, and the one after is going to be the validate experience. And for each one of those, we'll have a set of questions. Now, there is one thing I would like to do and ask your collaboration for, and this is the polls. If you could let me know now which ones you're most interested in. Maybe we can use these last few minutes to go back into those areas and talk a little bit more about those. Here we go, they're coming in. We have browse on the lead, purchase second. So search is normally performed by title, but nowadays with natural language search, you can search for a ton of other things, which may also include the reviews themselves. So content that comes from the reviews. But when it comes to B2B search, may well be based on the SKU code, or it may be by other parameters that need to be set at product level. So one thing which is really important, again, is to understand the importance of the product information. So unless you have those parameters set in the product in terms of attributes, you won't necessarily be able to filter by those areas, but also be able to search. Now, not all search technologies are the same. We have Clerk is one of the very advanced ones that is able to do quite a few things. However, not everybody has that tool. So maybe you can have a chat with Thijs about it. But the point being is that when you create your product information, you need to be able to understand, first of all, how you will want to filter those products by, what you want to filter them by, and also how you would like people to search for them. So again, very important to understand what your customers want, because otherwise you may be preparing all your product information and it may not be done in the right way. The second part is the landing pages. Now, in terms of landing pages, one thing which is important to understand is that it's not just purely content. So nowadays, these landing pages can be often created like with drag and drop editors, and you can pull in anything. So you can pull in products, product listing, you can pull in content, you can just do anything you like. So if I go online and search for a short white dress, then ultimately you could have a landing pages with all short white dresses directly, which is pre-filtered, and you can share that link with other people. So the importance of these landing pages is massive when it comes to campaigning and when it comes to the marketing that you do. And some of these landing pages can be mapped directly towards search terms, for example. So Thijs, so one thing that you can probably give a little bit more visibility on is really in this browsing experience, and specifically around the search, and how do you see best practices being in terms of mapping these like landing pages towards search, or anything which is really content? How do you search for that?
I mean, so I think what I would do in terms of like, setting us up for next session is maybe give a few examples of how people really push the boundaries a little bit on those areas in terms, because obviously there are various different there's some standard best practices, but depending on who your brand is and whether you're B2B, you might want to have a full search landing page with categories. You might want to index reviews. You might not want to index reviews, all those things. So there's a lot of things you could do out of the box, but I think an interesting thing that I've seen on search recently as well are people starting to add attributes on how high the return rates are on specific products, right? So if they have products that have very high return rates, they will add those attributes in to the Magento solution, and we can index on that and basically promote or dispromote accordingly, right? And we are able to even go to the stage where we're going to do it on kind of customer profile. But at the first level, what's very interesting is just the ability to really go in and say, well, these specific products do have certain high returns, and we're seeing that, and you're indexing all the time, and so that influences the search, right? In a manner wherever you're doing. And also from sort of landing pages, we've started to do what we would call like a customer page, really. So they're landing pages that really react to all those emails that you send out, where you don't necessarily specifically have a campaign around an email. So those are like really interesting landing pages. We've seen very, very good results of starting to use recommendation as that page to land on, so that it reacts to when you open your email and all those things. So you come back to those landing pages instead of just sort of a specific seasonal landing page for a specific campaign. So there's great results in that. And then with content blocks, particularly on something like B2B, it's been really interesting to see how people have, they might sell like, we have quite a big client that sells a lot of hair care products, right? And so they sell shears and all those things, and they'll have content blocks to come in how to maintain those shears, and that obviously lead on into all the sharpening tools and the oils and everything they can sell. So I think those are really interesting, and I think a place that people often overlook for recommendations is blog posting. So that's another great way to really place recommendations, is in if you have people who are big advocates of your brand and are willing to share on those things, or you're writing them yourself, instead of having sort of specific references to products that then 6 months, 3 months, a year later, those blog posts might still be trending, but they're not doing so well. Adding in and building your logic around recommendations there make them really very relevant ongoing, so you can kind of
There's one of,
set that up.
So there
So
is one of
that's
the, sorry, I'm interrupting. So one more thing here. So there are several examples of brands which are publishing stories on their websites. And in these stories is basically telling about the story of someone and how the product has related to that. And then you have the actual product being displayed there inside the story, and this story can then be republished outside of the website as well. So it's very nice how the product is really has a much closer relationship with content today than what it used to have before, when it was really just the catalog. And the other part that I think, again, Thijs, you can give a little bit. So we have 3 minutes left before the end of the session, but if people are not in a rush, maybe we can carry on for a few minutes. But in terms of recommendations and the overall personalization of the experience, so this is where I think it's critical, because there is no way, it's not possible to personalize the experience to each individual customer unless you're leveraging AI, because there is no one able to do it manually. You would have to look at the history of every single user constantly and then tailor the experience towards a specific user group, which is never relevant enough. So this is why the personalization process is so critical to the browsing experience on the website, because it makes it your browsing experience rather than the browsing experience. And I think that this is also very important to apply also in B2B, because each client that you have may have different buying patterns, and the recommendations in particular could give you the possibility as a company to get that client to buy products that they wouldn't otherwise purchase. But those recommendations are there to help them access the catalog in a different way that they normally wouldn't do. If you carry on importing the same CSV file, ordering the same products, you're never going to change. You're not exploring the other products. So these things, one more thing about this personalization, which is absolutely critical, is again in the B2B side of things, because imagine having a sales representative that goes to a client. Now, one thing is having a catalog with you. Another thing is accessing the history of that specific client and seeing the recommendation that the system is putting forwards for that client, and being able there and there to say, hey, I've seen that you are buying, that you've bought these products, but we also have these alternative products that could be of interest. And we see that these are selling well within other companies. Now, the recommendations can also be set, and Thijs, here you can probably tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I don't know whether this can be done with Clerk, but for sure it's something that companies are doing, to be able to place recommendations which are for upselling specifically, which is like, it's a similar product, very similar, but maybe the price is also the same, but your margin could be a little bit higher. So for the client, there is nothing that changes, but for you as a company, you're now selling products which have higher margins, or the ones that are left over in stock. So
it could be higher margin left on stock, a store. It could even be, if you're a multi-brand reseller, we're seeing brands promote, ask that they promote their product over, and even if it's just a promotion, they will pay the sites. Those brands will pay the sites for that boost in it. So both are possible, just to answer your question.
Okay, great. So at this point, we've reached midday here in UK, and we're going to call an end to the session. But the one thing that, just to say it again, so based on all the research that I've done in the past few years, it's not possible for me to collate all that information into one session. So I think that joining this series really would help you get that final self-assessment of your brand and how you're doing in terms of experience. And hopefully we can do this for other things as well. So we've seen at the beginning of the slides that there are other topics that we could be talking about, but this series specifically focuses around the experience side of things. Now, if you'd like to talk with us about some of the other sides that you're most interested in, which are outside the experience area, please reach out and maybe we can just have a dedicated session or a one-to-one just to have a conversation around that. But join the next upcoming sessions, because that's when we will actually be bringing out the data from the research and digging into each individual part. And I think that will feel more relevant. This may have felt a little bit rushed, but there is a lot to say, and 1 hour is only made of 60 minutes. So that's all I can do. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks to the panelists for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next session.